So have you ever used an amazing tool like this before? Maybe been in unfamiliar territory and had to pull out a compass out of your backpack as you're hiking. It's an amazing tool. If you know compass well, it doesn't matter which direction you turn this thing. It's not working as well because I'm holding it vertical instead of horizontally. But it doesn't matter which way you turn it. It will always point to magnetic north. And so you can use that constancy to figure out which way is south, east, west, and of course north. So very amazing tool. There's great applications to this in our daily lives. Is there an internal compass that you use to help decide which directions to take? This compass, it doesn't matter if it's day or night, if it's on holiday, on vacation, if you're working, it doesn't matter if you just worked a double shift, it doesn't matter if you're in Vegas, it doesn't matter what the conditions are, it will always point to magnetic north. And internally, do we have the same sort of moral internal compass that always points the same way? Just one example. Let's say after a weekend, you come back to the office and you've got a friend that's talking to you and he says, "You're not going to believe what just happened. I was out playing an innocent game of golf and I hit the ball and sliced it way to the left and went in off course and it sounded like it hit someone's house. I don't know for sure until all of a sudden, like 2 seconds later, this guy jumps over the fence. He's in my face. He said, you just broke my window. You've got to pay for that." Can you believe this guy's gall? As a friend, what would you say to him? "Yeah, you're right. The guy's crazy. It was an accident. He lives on a golf course. Give me a break. Just a part of living there. He shouldn't live there. Put up some nets. I'm not paying for that." So I gave him a fake name and number. What's your responsibility as a friend? Well, my compass points a little differently. I think you should pay for it. Sure, we all have accidents. It wasn't on purpose, but if I have an accident in my car, it's my fault. I have to pay for it. But how does your compass point? Is it your responsibility? What if you told the same story to your wife and she said, "Well, you gave him your real name and number, right?" "Well, no." "Well, you need to pay for that." If you need your wife to tell you what's right, you failed as a father and husband. Basically, it comes down to your conscience is your compass that guides you to your best possible life. Your conscience is a compass that points you to your greatest potential. Does God want you to act as a moral compass to others at all times and at all places? Absolutely. Some people's compasses are buried deep in their packs. They don't listen to it much anymore. Absolutely. There is a scripture in the Book of Mormon talks about a compass and how it related directly to these people's lives, their spiritual lives. Lehi and his family, as they were planning on taking a trip from Jerusalem to the New World, the Lord, in order to keep them on course, delivered to them it was called a Liahona, and it gave them directions as they made their journey across the ocean to the New World. And in Alma 37, 45 and 46, it talks about this, and the applications in our life, I think, are very good. "For just as surely as this compass did bring our fathers by following its course to the promised land, shall the words of Christ, if we follow their course, carry us beyond this vale of sorrow into a far better land of promise. O my son, do not let us be slothful because of the easiness of the way, for so it will with our fathers. For so was it prepared for them, that if they would look, they might live. Even so, it is with us. The way is prepared that we will look, we may live forever." There's a reference to Moses and the staff and the serpent on the staff. But there's a couple key phrases here. Compass being the words of Christ. Do not let us be slothful. I think, what are these words of Christ? Of course, it's our conscience. He gives you outward actions to take, the best possible actions to take, and also builds an internal, inward character. It's like he's remodeling a building and he's rebuilding you from the inside out. So that compass, it becomes a model of how Christ would act. That is your compass. So as far as, yeah, so it starts from learning more about his character, how you believe he would act, think, and feel and speak, and building that model. That model becomes a compass to guide you. And this is very interesting, the slothful part. What does that mean? Don't take the compass for granted. Don't be lazy. Don't be sloppy. Be precise in following the directions. Or sometimes people have this attitude, is like, well, I'm not really lost. I don't need a compass. A compass are for people that are lost and misdirected. Well, if you're not using that compass every single day, probably more often in every situation, then it only takes a few steps before you're misdirected and you'd be lost. Can this compass be damaged? If I tossed it off a cliff and this bezel came off and all of that, obviously, it can be, if it's not protected and used properly, of course, absolutely could be damaged. What are the biggest things that can damage your internal moral compass? How does pride and dishonesty affect your moral compass? It's almost like you're putting a magnet next to the compass, and it gives you bad readings if you've ever done that. The compass will give you those directions and tell you how to act. But sometimes people say, well, I don't really need to do that. I know a shortcut. I know a better way. It's more comfortable. If I do it my way, I'll make more money. It's that attitude, that the pride. It's almost like you're, like I say, putting your finger on the needle, getting that direction. Well, I'm going to go this different direction. But as soon as you let go of that needle, it's going to swing back to the correct position. And you'll see you're off course. You're out of alignment. I have to turn my body and walk in a different direction. If I'm walking off of the path, I'm misaligned. And it causes guilt. And that guilt is a good thing. Hey, what's wrong here? What have I done? Let me recheck my course. That guilt is like guardrails on a highway, keep you safe. But instead of reassessing your course, most people start lying to themselves. That's where the dishonesty starts. And why do they do that? They're trying to make that guilt go away. I don't like the guilt. That's where the lies start. And there's just two tools that I'll talk about that people use in this dishonesty format or forum. And it's rationalization to be justified. Most people try to rationalize their actions so they feel like they're justified in what they did. For example, like my company didn't pay for my kids' hospital bills because the insurance is crappy. So they stole from me. I'm going to steal from them. I rationalize to justify my actions. There are some techniques of rationalization that are used primarily to persuade oneself that you can engage in questionable conduct and remain a honest, good, moral person. And this example I share, I want to put the words up on the screen here because they're so powerful. the the delusion this guy had. If you remember, quite a few years ago, during the financial crash and that in 2001, one of the big catalysts of this was this Enron. Ken Lay, um, as the chairman and CEO of Enron, was indicted on multiple charges related to the company's collapse, including securities fraud, wire fraud, and making false statements, and was found guilty of fraud and conspiracy charges. Lay's company, Enron, went bankrupt in 2001. At that time, this was the biggest bankruptcy in US history. In total, 20,000 employees lost their jobs, and in many cases, their life savings. They had all of their retirement money tied up in Enron stock. Investors lost billions of dollars. And here's the kicker. In an interview on CNN in 2004, so a few years after this all unraveled, he said, "Number one and foremost, I threw my whole life and lived my life in a certain way to make sure I would never violate any law. Certainly, never any criminal laws, and always maintained that the most important to me was my integrity, was my character, were my values, and have always taken that very seriously." What in the world? And this all comes from Cecelia Moore, and she has a very interesting article that I'll put the link to that in the description field. But her title of her article is "Always the Hero to Ourselves, the Role of Self-Deception in Unethical Behavior." So what kind of world do you have to live in to think, as you're obviously he was in charge. Maybe there was some ignorance on the level, but what kind of self-deception do you have to live in to think that you are a good person doing that? How do you get to that point? What level of deception was he at in his life? What level of dishonesty? And this is a huge problem, this honesty issue. It's a huge problem in society. And I think there is levels of honesty and dishonesty, including myself. I had to reevaluate. There was a book I'm very excited about to talk about. I have a chance to get a preview of the book. And it's by Robert Smith. He's ready to publish this hopefully this month. And on April 26th, he's going to have a talk in Salt Lake County talking about the book of honesty. The title is "Be Who You Really Are to Become Who You Want to Be: Honesty with Yourself, Others, and God." It's a huge eye-opener. It's a huge step forward and up to become closer to God. You've got to start by being honest with yourself. You've got to give yourself a starting point so you know where you are at and where you need to go. I'll put the link to a video he just made about that upcoming talk, but I would recommend. My life has been enlightened. I have lived life with greater abundance, listening to and internalizing the things that Rob teaches. And it's all based on, it's not his teaching. It's all based on scripture and those things that are far above himself. He is a conduit. Back to this justification and rationalization thinking, there is only one person that can justify you and your actions. What do you need to do to be justified at the last day? Basically it comes down, you got to follow that internal compass. There's a final scripture that I'd like to share. It's in 2 Nephi 32:9. For behold, I say unto you that you must pray always and not faint, that you must not perform anything unto the Lord, save in the first place ye shall pray unto the Father in the name of Christ, and he will consecrate thy performance unto thee, that thy performance may be for the welfare of thy soul. So you just have to have this prayer in your heart at all times, that you will always be directed and listen to that internal compass, so that everything you do will be justified in God's eyes. No matter what it is, as long as you have that frame of mind, following that direction, you will be justified at the last day. Can't do it yourself. You have to give up your own will and live according to that direction internally that he sends through your conscience. But bottom line, is it someone else's job to be your moral compass? If it's your wife telling you what's right, you have failed. It's your job as a father and a husband to be the best that you can be, following your conscience, building that model so that you can help your wife, your sons, your daughters. You have to fix yourself first. You have to get to be a master of that, your conscience, become crystal clear. I challenge you to listen to your compass and use it every minute of every day. Don't bury it in a backpack. And there's hope. It doesn't matter how far off course you feel like you are. Take the compass out, get a direction, do the very best thing right in front of you, and keep doing that until the end of your life.